Candace Owens is one of the most influential political commentators in the world today. She stands for conservative values, openly professes faith in Christ, calls out the evil in the world, and is unapologetically outspoken. But as someone who also believes in Christ, I've noticed several red flags in her rise to fame. From her political shift, changes in her faith, to the controversial figures she supports such as Kanye West and Andrew Tate, and even her husband. In this episode, we're diving deep into Candace Owens' history and why I believe she may be controlled opposition. Welcome back to another episode of Didi Got a Podcast, and of course, I'm your host, Didi, back up in this bitch with another video. Listen, I'll be the first to admit this is probably not the best time for me to be making a video exposing Candace Owens' history, but we're about truth over here. We like to investigate things to get to the truth, and with me currently building my new channel called Didi Got Politics, a lot of people are being introduced to me over there for the first time and learning about how I left the left, right, and how I am a believer of Christ and how I am way more conservative than anything else. But guys, I'm not a Republican. Right? I'm not Republican or Democrat. Again, as a follower of Christ, I notice hypocrisies on both sides. So for a lot of people that may be a little bit too nuanced because they feel like you either got to be on one side or completely on the other side, you can't be super nuanced and see the downsides to both parties. But that's where I am. And so I want to make sure that I say that because I do agree with Candace Owens' political takes and a lot of the other things that she talks about. As a matter of fact, I'm willing to say that I agree with more than 90% of the things that Candace Owens talks about, if not more. But again, we call out double standards on this channel. And speaking of that, if you want the uncensored version of this video, please feel free to follow the Patreon, become a member of the Patreon. For those who are already members of the Patreon, there will be a video dropping later today of this lady who claims to not only be related to Jeffrey Epstein, she also claims to be a victim of Jeffrey Epstein's and other high-profile people, but she also claims to be the twin sister of Shia LaBeouf. Believe it or not, we delve into all of that on today's video later today on Patreon, so be on the lookout for that. Without further ado, it took a lot of research to look into this video. I put the poll up maybe a week ago or so, and a lot of you all said that you would like to see this video, and so I've done the research and I'm ready to present it to you all. Hit that like button for me if you don't mind. It really helps with the algorithm. Without further ado, let's get into Candace. So Candace Owens was born April 29, 1989 in Stamford, Connecticut. She was raised by her grandparents after her parents divorced. She actually graduated from Stanford High School, and then she later attended the University of Rhode Island for journalism, but left before completing her degree. In 2015, she created a blog called Degree 180, where she voiced her support for liberal values and political alignment. That's right, Candace Owens used to be a liberal. She was actually a staunch liberal, in fact, that to the point where she actually supported things like abortion. In 2016, Candace Owens launched a website called socialautopsy.com, which aimed to expose anonymous online bullies by linking their offensive comments to real-life identities. The project drew criticism, though, from both people on the left and the right, with privacy advocates and tech journalists condemning it as doxing. So in other words, Candace Owens was behind this project called socialautopsy.com, where basically they were trying to expose the identity of cyber bullies, right? But it ended up backfiring on her so much, in fact, that her identity and her address and things ended up being doxed, and people was trying to expose her instead because they felt like she was violating people's privacy rights. And after this happened, Candace Owens actually went silent for some time before she would return. And when she returned with a whole different outlook politically. Due to her experience with the online backlash and her observations of political double standards, Candace Owens actually shifted sharply right, becoming a vocal critic of the left and quote-unquote woke culture, which, by the way, we'll get into this later in the video when I talk about Andrew Tate. But the term woke culture, I do 100% believe that term has been hijacked from a political perspective, because woke used to mean something completely different. It actually just didn't mean anything negative. It actually meant something very positive, and it wasn't politically related at all. It just simply meant be awake, be aware, right? Pay attention to things. Don't let people take advantage of you. Be socially aware. It had nothing to do with the left or the right, but again, it's been hijacked. So now we typically associate woke with the left, even though now they're coming up with the term with the woke right. So I want to state that for the record. Again, before this point, Candace Owens was actually a liberal who actually found herself criticizing conservatives quite often, including Donald Trump. In her own words, though, once she flipped and she realized that the left was not what she wanted to align with, she was quoted saying, I realized the left wasn't interested in truth or fairness, only control. And I want to state for the record, I don't believe necessarily simply going from the left to the right or the right to the left or from the left or the right to the middle makes you a bad person or means that you're controlled opposition. I don't believe that because I have a similar story, both politically and personally in my life. Everything told me that I was supposed to be left. But as a follower of Jesus Christ and a person who think for myself, I realized I don't align with everything that the left stands for. Some things I find myself more progressive leaning, absolutely. But a lot of things I'm like, this is anti-God, this is anti-Bible, I don't support it, I'm no longer over here with y'all. Then in 2017, Candace gained national attention through YouTube and Twitter for criticizing Black Lives Matter and defending Trump, so which was a complete 180. In 2018, she was hired by Turning Point USA as their communications director, amplifying her reach in the conservative movement. And she became known for saying things like, I've never been a slave and this country gave me freedom and why would I hate it, right? Then she became a frequent guest on Fox News, political podcasts, and conservative panels. Now, for me personally, this was becoming a red flag for me when I looked into this because I'm like, y'all have to understand how hard it is to consistently get on certain platforms and to be openly welcome consistently on these platforms already caused me to make a side eye Candace Owens. And then it was in 2018 when she was actually praised by Kanye West on Twitter, who tweeted, I love the way Candace Owens thinks, which basically boosted her visibility into pop culture. Then Candace Owens launched something called the Blexit movement to encourage Black Americans to leave the Democratic Party and embrace conservative values, personal responsibility, and family stability. And a lot of people who were against it said that this was basically political rebranding because she received a lot of backlash as a liberal, but a lot of supporters said that this was basically challenging a monolithic way of thinking. In 2019, she testified before Congress, and this is when many of us, including myself, it was this and her debate against T.I. and Killer Mike at that one debate that I've talked about many times on this channel. I've made like 40 videos on Candace on this channel. And it was in that moment, and then this moment when she testified before Congress. Those were two of the biggest moments that really placed Candace in the forefront for a lot of people to first become introduced to her. Because in this testimony, she was defending conservative speech and criticizing the concept of quote-unquote systemic racism. And then in 2021, she launched Candace, which was a political talk show with The Daily Wire, which was, of course, founded by Ben Shapiro. And this platform, as we all know, was a mixture of pop culture, politics, and faith, especially from a Christian and traditionalist lens or point of view. She was against, she was anti-woke, she was pro-life advocacy, she was about traditional family values, she critiqued race-based victimhood narratives, primarily when it came to the Black community, because as we all know, the moment she started criticizing the Israel population and the Jewish community, this eventually led to her being let go from the Daily Wire, which showed Daily Wire and a lot of conservatives double standard and hypocrisy. And then, of course, she was in support of nationalism and Western values. And another criticism Candace Owens received a lot of this time she was first introducing herself as conservative was that she was oversimplifying complex racial issues or serving as the quote-unquote token conservative voice. Accusation, of course, she denies, but I think part of this has to be true. After the Daily Wire decided to let her go, the moment she started to criticize Israel and the Jewish population. She was quote-unquote the token Black person to criticize Black people because it would reach more people because of what she looks like. Even though, again, I agree with a lot of things that Candace Owens says about the Black community, this is fair criticism. Now let's get into some of my issues with Candace Owens. One of the biggest things I found myself asking a lot of times early on was, where did Candace Owens come from? Not physically or literally, right, but figuratively speaking, right? Her large platform, both through the Daily Wire and independently, was one of the early red flags in my opinion, because I need you all to understand from a content creator's perspective, it is extremely difficult to reach 3, 4, 5, 6 million subscribers. I am under the belief as of this moment right now, it took me a while to get here, that if you are of that level of 3, 4, 5, 6 million subscribers on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, it is so difficult to get to that point, and it takes so long, I couldn't even fathom it. It's not just because I haven't accomplished it, but I look at just the general outlook of content creators and the grind and the work that it takes to get to certain levels. I personally believe that you have to be controlled to get there. From one side or the other, I personally believe that. But it wasn't just the fact that Candace Owens was so popular. It's not about jealousy or not being able to fathom being that famous or that popular. It's not about that. It's the fact that not only did Candace Owens seem to gain all of these followers, but it's the fact that, because there's a lot of, as a content creator, you know that your subscriber count don't necessarily reflect the views that you get. It all depends on how you got those subscribers, when you got those subscribers, what they're interested in, and if you're consistently posting about that. Candace Owens not only has more than 4 million subscribers on YouTube alone, but almost every single upload this woman makes gets over 1 million views, bro, or something close to it. That's unheard of. I mean, literally just about every single video. That's the fact that YouTube, to get to my ultimate point, the fact that YouTube and the algorithm supports and pushes Candace Owens, despite the fact that she talks about things that, as content creators who's in the pro-truth community, we know that certain things are shadow banned. YouTube can deny it all they want. Certain things are shadow banned, that's a fact. But if you talk about sports, you'll be pushed. If you talk about debauchery, pop the balloon, dating shows, you'll be pushed. As long as it's good quality, and good quality that means like camera quality, audio quality, and you're consistent and you do all the technical things for your YouTube channel, you will be pushed. But when you start, even if your camera quality or your audio quality, even if you're consistent, you have a great, well put together platform, if you're talking about things that are too Christian, if you're talking about things that are too quote unquote conspiracy theory based, they will shadow ban your content. The opposite happens for Candace Owens. She goes viral almost every other day. To me, that's a huge red flag. The next thing that really stood out to me about Candace Owens is what I mentioned earlier in the video, the fact that Kanye West even tweeted her name. Kanye West is not just tweeting anybody's name. Even when he goes on his rant and y'all think he's out of his mind or whatever, he's not going to give somebody who don't deserve the attention. The fact that he tweeted this woman, to me, once again, we'll get into Kanye West and his history here in a bit, but that was a red flag as well. And then when I delved into Candace Owens' history, she used to work for PragerU, that is literally owned by billionaires. And as you know, when you work for someone, you can't just talk about whatever you choose. They have to greenlight it and be okay with the message that's being shared with the masses, and then they'll push your message massively. Also, during her time with PragerU, she endorsed the private prison industry, arguing that private prisons, which literally means private prisons that has performance incentives or quotas, are better than public prisons, which are government run. And even though we know there's a private prison pipeline agenda linked directly to the music industry dating back to the 1990s, which is why there was a shift in the type of music in hip hop, with NWA being one of the first groups to push gang, drug, and anti-police culture.
The letter is the secret meeting that changed rap music and destroyed a generation.
Damn.
Hello. After more than 20 years, I finally decided to tell the world what I witnessed in 1991, which I believe was one of the biggest turning points in popular music and ultimately American society. I have struggled for a long time weighing the pros and cons of making my story public, as I was reluctant to implicate the individuals who were present that day. So I've simply decided to leave out the names and all the details that may risk my personal well-being and that of those who were, like me, dragged into something they weren't ready for.
Damn.
Hold on, let me...
So we gonna tell a story.
We gonna tell the story. We ain't scared.
You know what I'm saying? What they gonna do?
They after us now.
Look, that black van.
So look, so he says, between the late 80s and early 90s, I was what you may call a decision maker with one of the more established companies in the music industry. I came to Europe in the early 80s and quickly established myself in the business. The industry was different back then, since technology and media weren't accessible to people like they are today. The industry had more control over the public and had the means to influence them any way it wanted.
Right.
This may explain why in early 1991, I was invited to attend a closed-door meeting with a small group of business insiders to discuss rap music's new direction. Little did I know we would be asked to participate in one of the most unethical and destructive business practices ever seen.
Crazy.
So this was the meeting. The meeting was held at a private residence on the outskirts of Los Angeles. I remember about 25 to 30 people were being there. Right. Most of them familiar faces. Speaking of those I knew, we joked about the theme of the meeting, as many of us did not care for rap and failed to see the purpose of being invited to a private meeting to discuss the future of hip-hop.
Talk to them.
Among the attendees was a small group of unfamiliar faces who stayed to themselves and made no attempt to socialize beyond their circle. Based on their behavior and formal appearances, they didn't seem to be from our industry. Our casual chatter was interrupted when we were asked to sign the confidentiality agreement, preventing us from publicly discussing the information presented during the meeting. Needless to say, this intrigued, in some cases, disturbed many of us. The agreement was only a page long, but very clear on matters and consequences, which stated that violating the terms would result in job termination immediately. We asked several people what this meeting was about and the reason for such secrecy, but could not find anyone who had the answers for us. A few people refused to sign and walked out. Nobody stopped them. I was tempted to follow, but curiosity got the best of me.
That's right.
A man who was part of the unfamiliar group collected all the agreements from us. So now it's going to get to the good part because the meeting about to start.
Talk to him, G.
It says, quickly after the meeting began, hold on one second.
Get your popcorn, y'all.
Popcorn, get your pistol. No,
for real.
Quickly after this meeting began, one of the industry colleagues, who shall remain nameless like everybody else, thanked us for attending. He then gave the floor to a man who only introduced himself by first name and gave no other details about his personal background. I think he was the owner of the residence, but that was never confirmed. He briefly praised all of us for the success we had achieved in our industries and congratulated us for being selected as part of this small group of decision makers. At this point, I began to feel slightly uncomfortable and the strangeness of this gathering. The subject quickly changed as the speaker went on to tell us that the respective companies we represented had invested in a very profitable industry, which could become even more rewarding with our active involvement.
Damn.
He explained that the companies we worked for had invested millions into the building of privately owned prisons, and that our positions of influence in the music industry would actually impact the profitability of these investments. Then he says, I remember many of us in the group immediately looking at each other in awe and confusion. At the same time, I didn't know what a private prison was, but I wasn't the only one. Sure enough, someone asked what these prisons were and what any of this had to do with music. We were told that these prisons were built by privately owned companies who received funding from the government based on the number of inmates. The more inmates, the more the government would pay these prisons. It was also made clear to us that since these prisons are privately owned, as they become publicly traded, we'd be able to buy shares. Most of us were taken back by this. Again, a couple of people asked what this had to do with us. At this point, my industry colleague who had first opened the meeting took the floor again and answered our questions. He told us that since our employees had become silent investors in this prison business, it was now in their interest to make sure that these prisons remain filled. Our job would be to help make this happen by making music which promote criminal behavior, rap being the music of choice. He assured us that this would be a great situation for us because rap music was becoming an increasingly profitable market for our companies, and as employees, we'd also be able to buy stocks in these prisons. Immediately, silence came over the room. You could have heard a pin drop. I remember looking around to make sure I wasn't dreaming and saw half of the people with dropped jaws. My daze was interrupted when someone shouted, "Is this a fucking joke?" At this point, things became chaotic.
Right.
Two of the men who were part of the unfamiliar group grabbed the man who shouted and attempted to remove him from the house. A few of us, myself included, tried to intervene. One of them pulled out a gun, and we all backed off. They separated us from the crowd, and all four of us was escorted outside. My industry colleague who opened up the meeting earlier hurried out to meet us and reminded us that we had signed an agreement and would suffer the consequences of speaking out about this publicly, or even those who attended the meeting. I asked him why was he involved with something so corrupt, and he replied, "It's bigger than the music business and nothing we can do." No, it's bigger than the music business and nothing we want to challenge without risking consequences. We all protested as we walked back into the house. I remember word for word the last thing he said, "It's out of my hands now. Just remember you signed an agreement." He then closed the door behind him. The men rushed us to our car and actually waited until we drove off the property.
Damn.
So this meeting, bro.
Now that's a lot for a meeting right there.
Oh yeah, definitely. And this person later on, he said, this person actually ended up leaving the music industry. After this happened, a few years after this, he ended up leaving the music industry.
Okay.
And he said he just over the years, he just felt guilty because he said as he sat back and he watched these plans come to a reality.
Over 2 decades.
He sat back and was like, wow, they really pulled it off.
Which is something else we talked about on this channel 3 years ago in my More Than a Coincidence series. The fact that Candace Owens promoted something like this and made an argument like this on YouTube is not only mind-blowing, but it's also hypocritical because you can also find places where Candace Owens has quite literally talked about being against hip-hop and being against the message that's in hip-hop and how it destroys the family, especially the black community. But here she is talking about why the private prison is better than public prisons. It's hypocrisy 101. And then another thing that always rubbed me wrong when it came to Candace is Candace Owens will do a deep dive on Kamala Harris, the George Floyd and Black Lives Matter movement, Bridget McCrone, Apollo 11 and the moon landing and why she believes it's not real, the Harvey Weinstein story, the music industry in Hollywood, but she refuses to do the same backstory on others like Donald Trump, the Catholic Church, Kanye West, Andrew Tate, and others. Candace Owens has religiously stated that she's against pornography and how harmful it is to everyone, especially men, and how it warps the mind of those who consume it. Yet Kanye West not only promotes pornography on his Twitter to millions of his followers and tries to sell it, but he also flaunts his wife around naked religiously. He has also been accused of several things both legally and just simply across the internet by people in the industry who didn't even file lawsuits but just wanted to get the story out there that we've covered on this channel of assaulting women and trying very sexually depraved activity by multiple different women. Which isn't hard to believe because, I mean, he literally married a woman in Kim Kardashian who became famous off of, technically speaking, pornography. Candace has said absolutely nothing about it despite heavily covering Hollywood MK Ultra and its depravity. She has also said absolutely nothing about Kanye West's ties to Satanism, Occultism, and Freemasonry. In many of his videos and pictures, Kanye West has consistently told us how he became famous.
I sold my soul to the devil. I know it's a crappy deal. Music came with a few toys like a Happy Meal.
Categorize.
They can't control me. You get what I'm saying? They can control Shaq. They can control Charles Barkley. They can control LeBron James. They can control Jay-Z and Beyonce.
I know you, man.
But they can't control me.
No,
You see, it
you.
ain't no name I won't name. It's up.
No, you.
You know what I'm saying? And just for Minister Farrakhan, I love you. But the way you read that, I took that as a slight. You know what I'm saying? I'm taking no disrespect from nobody. So let's get on the phone and let's talk that out. I don't care who you are. I ain't taking no slice from nobody, right? I ain't taking no slice from nobody. It's God. That's the only person that I serve. My mom ain't here. My mama was sacrificed.
Me too.
You understand?
I'm Christian.
Michael Jordan, what about him? His daddy, right? Bill Cosby, his son, right? Dr. Dre, his son. You're out in Hollywood, a lot of people come up missing. Feels like it might be a lot of that in order to control, traumatize. They want to monetize and traumatize.
With the Freemason twin pillars showcasing here, horns on these individuals' heads, and the chain of the Egyptian god Horus around his neck, which is a god Aleister Crowley, who was the self-proclaimed most evil or most wickedest man in the world. He literally supported this in his religion, who once again, that being Aleister Crowley, is another person Candace Owens has religiously talked about on her channel. She has even promoted Kanye West's Vulture album, which literally stands for all the things she said that she is against. Why hasn't she done a deep dive on him, but chooses to support him no matter what? I mean, is it because she feels indebted to Kanye for the reason she is famous for tweeting her name many years ago? I mean, she kind of tells us why she supports Kanye West no matter what.
I will always love Ye. I will always defend him because I think he did one of the bravest things in speaking about what happened to him, and the questions were never answered about what Harley Pasternak did to him that night. And I think it's what was done to Britney Spears based on my readings of MK Ultra program, which has never been stopped. I think Harley Pasternak it's extremely problematic, and he's literally telling you what happened to him and no one's listening. And everyone's like, he's gone crazy. They drugged me against my will, and when you read those experiments of how they could literally give somebody a mental disorder via a cocktail of drugs, LA becomes very scary.
Who was that? I didn't hear
Harley
that.
Pasternak, the trainer that trains all the stars, dying in baths. Yeah, allegedly. Aaron Carter, when he reached out to Kanye, and when Kanye said Harley Pasternak did this, Aaron Carter tweeted at Kanye and said, "We should talk," and then that was his last tweet. The next day, Aaron Carter was found dead in a bath. There's something very evil brewing in Hollywood, and I think he was one of the bravest people ever who spoke out on what happened to him. And I won't deal with everybody talking about the after when we're not talking about the before.
You don't think his stuff is a bit much now, though?
Like I said, we got to deal with the before. Like Kanye was Kanye, and then Harley Pasternak took him to his house and got an ambulance and had him drugged and admitted that in a text message. He said, "I'll do it again and we'll take you to La La Land." He was military trained in the Canadian military and was allowed to experiment with drugs on humans. He spoke about that openly. What the hell is he doing as a gym trainer in LA to all the stars? So I have questions about what happened to Kanye, and I will always be, until we get those answers and the media really looks into Harley Pasternak, who was also Brittany Murphy's trainer. It's just weird.
But speaking of Freemasonry, let's talk about Donald Trump. In order to reach the level of power, history has shown us that you are most likely controlled opposition and or you're already selected and not elected to become president. America was literally founded by Freemasons, hence land of the free, free being short for Freemasons. And Candace Owens not only knows this, but she has publicly admitted this herself.
Now, this is a great time for us to pause and discuss Freemasonry because there are so many different elements, cultural elements of this, which I think a lot of Americans have the wrong idea. Either they don't think Freemasonry is real, or they don't believe that Freemasonry is relevant, or they believe that Freemasonry is innocent. And I'm going to speak about all of those things. So first and foremost, what is Freemasonry? Full stop, okay? So during the late Middle Ages, the world was united under the Holy Roman Catholic Church, okay? So if you had any opposition to the church throughout Europe, you were forced to go underground, right? We were a Christian society. And among the only organized groups that were able to move freely throughout Europe were these guilds of stonemasons, and they would then be therefore, because they could move freely, hence Freemasons, they were able to maintain meeting halls or lodges in virtually every major city. And the Masons were essentially very talented at architecture, and they had a bunch of secret knowledge, sometimes secret knowledge of architecture and of other topics. And that knowledge was dated back to the times of Egypt, right? And it was essential maintaining this knowledge in the construction of European churches and cathedrals. So one of the things that is well known is that Freemasons were in opposition to the church, right? They wanted to crush the church, which is why it is not ironic that the person who founded the Mormon church, as just one example, many of the churches, the very many Protestant faiths that we have, was Joseph Smith, and he was a Freemason. That's a fact, just as one example. Now, you may know some people that are Freemasons, and you're going, well, I know this person, and he goes to a lodge, and he's completely harmless. Yes, it is a known thing that something like 97% of Freemasons are not in the top tier degree of Freemasonry. And it is understood that at the top tier degree of Freemasonry, you essentially become one of the makers of the world. Now, I remember, and I've spoken about this on this podcast, but one of the things that kind of ripped me into a new reality last year when I was studying with some priests was they sort of looked at me. I was in London at the time, and they just said to me in the kindest way possible, "You Americans don't know anything about real history. You know nothing about your own country. You don't even know that your country was established by Freemasons," right? And it's interesting, of course, that I'm referring to Catholic priests. I believe a lot of the reasons why people hate Catholicism or hate Catholics is because Catholics know history. They have been recording history for a long time. So if you're a Freemason and you're working to rewrite history, or you're telling people that America was established because of this or because of that, and you completely remove the aspects of Freemasonry from our textbooks as they have, then yeah, you are going to be at conflict with the Catholic Church, who remembers everything and keeps, very good records of history. So I'm just, for those of you guys who've never even heard of that, and like I said, I would have been among you. I'm very new to relearning American history through the lens of Freemasonry. Some known Freemasons: George Washington was a Freemason. Thomas Jefferson was a Freemason. Benjamin Franklin was a Freemason. Buzz Aldrin was a Freemason. Don't get me started. For those of you that have been listening to this podcast for a long time, you already know where I'm at when it comes to NASA and the weird satanic chants that they were doing to establish the Apollo program and all of the weird stuff that happened leading up to the moon landing. So I freaked out when I learned Buzz Aldrin was a Freemason, and it's not helping my case in believing those moon landings, I'll tell you that for free. Franklin Roosevelt was another Freemason. Sigmund Freud, that got me into a lot of trouble this year because I started speaking about Sigmund Freud, who's a member of B'nai B'rith, and I was telling you, like, this guy who keeps writing about child sex. Yeah, there are some things you should know about him. He was a Freemason. Mozart was a Freemason. Okay, so at a point in our history, and likely even today, it was all about a battle for power, a battle for dominion over the earth, and they had all different sorts of aims. And it is true that different groups, high degree of Freemasons, practiced sexual rituals. And again, that gets back into the origins of NASA.
Speaking of Donald Trump, about 3 years ago on this channel, I made a video about the young kid who proved that every single president except for one are literally related to one another, with the same bloodline dating back to the royal family and King John of England. So I believe you have to be a Freemason to reach that point of power and influence, and it makes sense. But many don't want to or don't like to hear it when it comes to Trump. Candace Owens knows this. So if you know this, why would you push or encourage a person to support anybody that's in the White House? If anything, just tell them to keep their Christian values, make sure that they're not supporting something that's against it. But for you to be all in on Donald Trump or any other president when you know what it takes to get to that point tells me that you are a part of the same circus that you're claiming to fight against, which is part of the reason I've religiously said on this channel that I'm not Republican or Democrat. As a Christian man, I recognize that the laws in this country most likely have almost nothing to do with the right or left wing parties. Because again, right or left wing. These are two wings of the same bird, and I've been saying this on this channel since 2021. So again, to me, the fact that she claims to stand for truth, but would promote any of these candidates is a red flag. Would you all agree? Another thing is that Candace Owens is a Catholic. I mean, she used to be Christian, but she transitioned after she met her husband, who we'll talk about later. And I've talked about this briefly in another video regarding the Pope, but this was a major red flag to me because if you claim to believe in Jesus Christ, but is a part of a religion that literally prays to Mary and treats the Pope as some sort of intermediary to Christ, is one of the biggest red flags that are out there. In a recent interview, Candace literally addresses the backlash from many of her supporters that claim that she never delves into the evil history of the Catholic Church, stating that she has talked about this before.
I know you brought up Catholic and being Christian several times, so clearly your faith is important to you. But you know, these Catholics, they be playing with the kids? Because you talked about the slippery slope. Now, I ain't gonna say the Pope did it, but there's a lot of them running around in those dresses who have touched on kids, and we know that's more than Ash Wednesday. So when we're condemning groups of people, how can you condemn the slippery slope but not talk about your own church that you make on?
Let's be very clear, that's just false.
You think so?
I know, I'm saying let me tell you what is false. It is false that I have not spoken about that.
Well, I'm not speaking about it.
Let's be clear. There's not, to pretend that is restricted to any institution, whether you're talking about schools where it happens, church where it happens, amongst, gay relationships where it happens, or straight relationships where it happens, would be ridiculous. I've never said that. I would never say that. And in terms of the Catholic Church, because I've been on this journey and speaking about history, which is crazy, the media freaked out when I spoke about this really sadistic Frankist movement that took place in the 1700s, where they developed this belief in apostasy, which is to pretend that you're a part of a different religion, and then as a way to overthrow that religion. These people literally were baptized into the Catholic Church. I've spoken about that. And they were a part of a Frankist cult, and they believe this as a sacrament. They believe in children. I've spoken about that on the show. To say that I don't speak about that when I did an entire series on Emmanuel Macron, Catholic wife, whatever you want to call it, is ridiculous. So people just say things like, how come you don't talk about this? I'm like, I've spoken about this extensively, and wherever evil is, I will call it out.
My issue is that Candace is talking about, while very important, but superficial incidents in the church's history. But what many of us complain about is not necessarily just the history of the church from an incident perspective, but from a faith and a belief system perspective, and how it is the continuation of the Roman Catholic Empire. It places dead individuals and other living human beings such as the Pope on a pedestal that is not only unbiblical, but it is also blasphemous. The scripture says Jesus Christ is the truth, the way, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. It literally makes me believe that Candace Owens is being used to draw more people into the Catholic faith. It makes the most sense, because how can you be about delving into the history and all these different things, but you completely overlook all the red flags about the Catholic Church? Not to mention this picture of Candace Owens that immediately drew more red flags, as the inside of the Catholic Church heavily resembles that of Freemason lodges. There's no way you can tell me that you don't see the resemblance here. And there's no way you can tell me Candace Owens hasn't noticed the same resemblance. There's a checkerboard flooring because Freemasons believe in duality. There's the Masonic twin pillars that can be found in just about every Freemason lodge there is. It also doesn't help when the church has a history directly tied to Freemasonry, but if that's something you want to hear about, again, I talked about this in my video about the Pope, so go and check that out. Another person that she supports no matter what, that she's received backlash for, is Andrew Tate. Again, Candace has spoken out against pornography, but Andrew Tate, while claiming to believe in God, he once was a Christian, once was a Muslim, not only has a history in the very thing that Candace seems to be against, that being exploiting cam girls or girls on webcam, but this is something he's recently tweeted about and bragging about, being anti-God, anti-Christian, and how he got rich off of doing the things that Candace claims to be against.
Conservative losers tell you, get married. Ben Shapiro, a little Jew. The reason they'll say Andrew Tate's a bad guy is really because they know I get to live free and do what I want, live with my friends, and have endless children from endless beauty queens. You actually have to downplay your relationship with the girl of 6 years, which is difficult. And I only get away with that because the girl of 6 years plays along. So Vivian's been with me 6 years.
So he's been with Vivian for 6 years, right?
Because Vivian's younger. Melissa's like 28. Vivian's like 21.
Vivian's 21. And at this point, he's been a girlfriend for 6 years. It means that they met when she was 15 years old.
Not to mention, in fairness to him, he hasn't been convicted of anything, but he is quite literally being investigated for SA allegations, which is something he has bragged about for years, but now he denies it. Yet not only does Candace not dedicate entire videos or documentaries exposing him, just like she has other people and organizations, his history and his hypocrisy, but she actually platforms him instead and mostly speaks about the things that they have in common. Why would she do this? Andrew Tate is also controlled opposition because he not only consistently displays Masonic hand signs, but he literally claims to be for truth, helping young men escape the matrix and all this, that, and the third, while in the same breath choosing to charge thousands of young men lots of money in order to gain that knowledge to better their life. I mean, if you're about helping them, why are you charging them so much money to do so? Andrew Tate is a liar and a scam artist. And if you want to see an entire video on him, just comment Andrew Tate is a fraud below, and that'll be one of my next videos. Maybe Candace chooses to support him because he has a huge following that she could benefit off of, or maybe because, I don't know, Andrew Tate has a history and a connection and a relationship with Candace Owens, his husband. I mean, maybe that's why. But either way, it's hypocritical and it's dishonest. But speaking of Candace Owens, his husband, let's talk about him for a sec. Candace is married to a guy by the name of George Thomas Farmer, who is a British guy who attended Oxford University, where he studied theology and was a member of something called the Bullingdon Club, which is an elite secretive dining society known for its wealthy, aristocratic members. The club is shrouded in secrecy, with members adhering to a strict code of silence akin to that of the mafia, or quite literally Freemasonry. Initiation rites and internal proceedings are closely guarded, contributing to its mystique. While specific rituals are not publicly documented, the club's activities have included extravagant dinners followed by acts of vandalism for which members traditionally offer immediate compensation. The Bullingdon Club has been a subject of public scrutiny due to its members' subsequent rise to positions of power and the club's perceived embodiment of elitism. Its reputation for fostering connections among Britain's upper echelons has led to debates about privilege and influence within the UK's socio-political landscape. And some famous members include people like David Cameron and Boris Johnson, which are both former UK prime ministers. People, the fact that you are associated with a club that just so happens to have birthed two former UK prime ministers is everything but a coincidence. As y'all know, I'm done with coincidences on this channel, bro. Which, by the way, it literally reminds me of the Bushes. You know, the Bushes went to Yale, and they were also a part of something called Skull and Bones, which is quite literally a secret society on campus that many people don't know all of their secrets. Some of it has been quote unquote leaked, but the Bushes went on to become presidents. But they'll lead you to believe, or have you to believe, this is just a coincidence. It has nothing to do with nothing. Right. And then when you delve into like George's family background, he comes from a wealthy and politically connected family in the UK. He is the son of a man called Lord Michael Farmer, who is a British hedge fund manager and Conservative Party donor. George's father, Michael, was literally nicknamed Mr. Copper due to his wealth from metal trading. And he was also a member of something called the House of Lords, which placed him in close proximity to British aristocracy and top conservative circles. So my ultimate point is, you want me to believe that Candace Owens just so happens to gain this prominence by starting off as liberal, becoming conservative, which I see no problem with switching and changing your political perspective at all. But it's just too many coincidences. You go through that. You also work for PragerU, but you also working for Turning Point USA, which isn't necessarily the easiest jobs to come about. And then you got a job with Daily Wire. You amassed all these millions of followers, but then you met this guy who have all these high political connections. And I know she's had him on her podcast, but I take a lot of things with a grain of salt because he just so happens to be from this super powerful family that also happens to be a part of this club that birthed two former prime ministers. My ultimate point is, don't allow anybody to tell you that you should follow any politician or that you should do something that steers you away from Jesus Christ. Because something I noticed early on with politicians, both on the left and the right, was that whenever they were for a politician, it made absolutely no sense to me that they almost never criticized that person. Sure, Candace Owens, as of late, has criticized Donald Trump as it relates to Israel. But if you notice, anything outside of that, she hasn't really criticized him for. I don't respect it. I don't care what you identify as. If a person is wrong for something, Donald Trump is often wrong about several things. If you notice, conservatives don't call him out about it. Just like people on the left have this cognitive dissonance and they're blind when it comes to things about Biden and Kamala Harris. You have to be consistent. And I see inconsistencies when it comes to all these people, which, by the way, I'm going to make videos once I find time and I actually do the research for these people. I'm going to do background stories and checks on other people as well, on the conservative and on the left, right? To expose these people, because again, I don't think you've reached this level unless you're controlled, right? This is my video on Candace Owens. Y'all in the comment section, let me know what you think. As always, hit that like button. I appreciate you all for being here. As always, I'm Demetrius. I go by Didi. I'm out this bitch. Peace. Oh yeah, Didi got a podcast.